Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and today we have with us a special creator, Shirlee Draper, who works with Cherish Families Organization. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So usually we start off with your Mormon story, or I guess kind of what led you to creating Cherish Families. Let's start there.
Okay, well, I was born and raised in the FLDS sect. So I was born in Colorado City, grew up there, spent my entire life there. And it was really, I mean, it's a long, long story, but leaving the community and not having the resources I needed to be able to leave, it took 6 years of planning and saving to be able to leave the community. And so once I got out, I started having people ask me for help so that they could get out as well. And for 10 years, just was doing a lot of grassroots social work and realized that something had to be different. And so that led to, teaming up with Alina Darger and the creation of Cherish Families. And that's kind of the short story of getting there.
Do you remember, was your experience as a young girl, did it just seem normal to you? It's just like you thought that your life was what everybody else was going through?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, my life was normal in that was the water I swam in, right? I mean, fish don't know different waters. and so it was really normal inside my community, which was quite isolated from the rest of the world. Now, that didn't mean, as a child, I knew that the rest of the world existed. I had family outside of the community who weren't part of our group. And so, we would go to Cedar City at the time for dental work and things like that. And so I knew we were unique to the world and in the world, but it was all I knew. Certainly, my parents were born into, at least my father and his parents before him and their parents before them. So, we've been in polygamy since 1839, I want to say. It goes way, way back. So it was definitely, part of my DNA, part of the air that I breathed, the language I spoke. It was all I knew.
Did you say 1839?
Something like that. It was really, really early on.
That's about the same time Nauvoo was founded, I think.
Yes.
Quite literally back to the beginning of it all. Are you comfortable saying what was maybe your final push or final straw that got you to the point of leaving? If not, we can move on from that. But if you're comfortable, I think.
Sure. I mean, let me back up a little bit too. I want to talk about my childhood because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about polygamy in general. And I try to, I do a lot of cultural sensitivity education. So I talk about this a lot, but growing up, my childhood, I always say I was raised in a village. When people say it takes a village to raise a child, people don't actually know what that is because very few people nowadays experience it, but we did, in that it was a safe, remote, contained, self-contained community, geographically contained. So I knew literally everybody in town. I knew where everybody lived. I knew everybody's kids. There were no strangers, and all the moms in town were my moms. All the, if I was out walking and I needed a ride home, somebody would stop and pick me up. I knew I would get home safe. It was just the way it was. I went to public school there. It was kind of an idyllic upbringing in that I didn't watch television. Right. I played outside instead. I played the piano. I read books. And so I wasn't playing video games. I wasn't in the house. And because of that, I absorbed a lot more information than other people did. And our family was really tight knit. We were really musical and we really loved each other. And so this was the community that I grew up in. This was a childhood that I have a lot of fond memories about. And so I also, being born in this, I knew this is what God wanted me to do. Mm-hmm. I knew that I was one in a million as far as chosen, and we were a light on a hill, and that we were doing God's work. And the fact that the world hated us meant that we were right. And I didn't have any disconfirming information to that. And so one of the
Okay.
things that our community practiced, our particular group, was arranged marriage. And so at the age of 22, I was almost 23, I was placed into an arranged marriage and started having children.
And who
And
is
that,
the prophet that would arrange the marriage, or was it a group, a committee?
no, it was the prophet.
And who was that?
That was, at the time, it was Rulin Jeffs.
And was that an average age, or do you feel, were you kind of a little bit old for that, a little bit young for it, or just kind of right on the money?
When I got married, it was pretty average.
Average. Okay.
Like, there were girls older, much older than me at that point, that were getting married. And so, at different points in our history, there had been, really, really early on, there were girls that got married around 14 in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And then that stopped happening. And by the 1980s, when I became really aware of it, there were very, very rarely girls getting married younger than 18. And in the 1980s, it was around 18, 19, they were getting married. And by the time I got married in the early 90s, it was early 20s to mid 20s that girls were getting married. So that was kind of the trend. And then people were also going to college, and, it was becoming a lot more open. And that's right when Warren Jeff started becoming a right-hand man to his father. And when Warren Jeff would start speaking, I was, from the very first time I heard his voice, I was really put off by him. And at the time, I was able to just ignore him, say, "Oh, well, he's creepy, he's a weirdo, but that's okay. I don't have to listen to him," until he started gaining more power. It was
he's just a dweeb, and he'll never go anywhere. He'll never amount to anything.
Well, I just thought he was pretty extreme, and then just the vibes. I just, from the very first time I ever met him, he just grossed me out.
Any reason to believe that he would end up becoming as powerful as he was and end up prophet? So there was none of that at that time. Okay.
No,
right.
No, 100% no, because there was a structure, right? It's like we have the next worthy elder, we have the the prophet and the counselors, and then there's the
hierarchy,
the brethren, and we'll go all the way through that. And somebody has to move up all of those steps before they become next in line. Well, he started eliminating all of the competition pretty quickly. By 1998, he had gotten to where he was his father's spokesperson, and he was saying, his father says that, and I, going, father literally just said the opposite. That's, he was interpreting for him all the time. I'm just like, no, that's not what's happening. So Warren started interpreting for his father and speaking for his father, and they had been sending people away to repent, and the people that they were correcting and sending away included anybody that had any power at all, except for just two of the closest counselors to Rulin Jeffs. And because Rulin kept saying, "Warren speaks for me," then Warren would stand up and say, make all of these pronouncements. And the pronouncements were things that just I fundamentally disagreed with. They'd not been part of our religion. A lot more control over our daily lives, and what we could say and what we could wear and what colors, and whether we could speak to people and whether we could love people. And so
pets.
What
pets you could have.
I'm
right?
sorry?
And pets, what pets you could have?
Or if we could have pets, that was part of it. We couldn't have pets. And so there was just so much that he just kept saying, now we're doing this and now we're doing that. And during this time, I have children. So I have three children by the time Warren starts really getting into really high up in the power structure. This is about 1998. And in 1998, I remember one time sitting in church, and Warren stood up and said, "We have to shun anyone who has apostatized, utterly shun." And I think it was viciously shun, or some word like that. And he went on to say, "We are the only people that God loves, and he's going to destroy everyone else." And I just sat there and thought, man, God's an asshole. I've got children. If I were to look at my kids and say, only one of you is going to live and I'm going to kill the rest of you, I think I was a really crappy parent. And so in that moment, that was kind of a big aha to me. And I thought, I'm going to have to leave. Like, this is no longer my religion. I don't believe in this dude. He's clearly got a lot of power, and I'm not here for this.
Start looking for an exit plan, an exit strategy.
Yeah. But I'm also calculating, I have literally nothing. Like, the church owns the house I live in. I've got children. I have no income. I have no rental history. I have no credit history. I have no support structures on the outside. And bonus, every time I leave the community, because I'm visually identifiable as a deviant, I am treated with the requisite hostility that you reserve for felons.
But how did they know you were a deviant at this point then?
You can tell by looking at me that I'm a polygamist, right? I'm dressed with. I
thought you meant in the polygamous community.
No, in the world.
Yeah. When I leave the community, when I go to St. George, to the doctor, or anything like that, I get treated with incredible hostility.
You're othered.
And so I'm thinking, okay, I don't have anything.
Do you bring this up like with your husband, or is he just completely? You're leaving him, and you're not even gonna.
Well, no, because part of the problem is that if I reveal to anybody that I'm not believing, then I'm going to get ejected before I'm ready.
Okay, yeah.
And so I can't let anybody know that I'm having doubts. I can't reveal anything, because my safety and my kids' safety depends on my being able to stay there until I'm ready to go.
And you don't know who to trust. No,
I didn't. And then my husband was not fooled into believing that I was a, obedient believer, because I had never been very obedient. I'd always been really outspoken. And so he always had issues with me because of that, because I just couldn't be controlled. And so, he'd come home and say something about what we're supposed to be wearing. And I'm like, yeah, I don't believe that clothes hold the priesthood, and things like that. And so he was worried about me, and he knew that I was in a problem, and we had a lot of tension between us, but I had never said to him, I am going to leave. That was never a conversation, because I knew he would tell on me, and then I would get displaced and I wouldn't be able to bring my kids. So, time's going on. I'm thinking about how and if I'm going to make this. Meanwhile, my family is all still part of the community. I love them so much. They all support me. And I'm thinking, if I leave here, I'm going to give up literally everything. I mean, my identity, my sense of belonging, my place to live, my family, my support structures, literally everything, to go into a place that I have nothing, and I'm treated with a lot of hostility. So I'm doing this back and forth dance while I'm trying to figure out what I can do as far as money. How will I make this work?
That's right. How do you accumulate resources over that period of time?
I'm about to tell you. I gave birth to my daughter, who suffered a brain injury, and I started having to spend a lot of time with her in the hospital. But one of the things that happened was, she was on Medicaid, and Medicaid would reimburse me every time I did medical transportation for her. And so I set up another checking account and had them directly deposit that money into that account. My husband didn't know about it. And so I started being able to save up money that way. And so this was in 2001. So between 2001 and 2004, I was saving up that money, but it wasn't, that's not a lot of money. And it's not you don't get a lot of money from medical reimbursement. But I was also, trying to find out whether any of my siblings were feeling the way I was feeling, any of my friends. And I would just say little things here and there and try to get anybody's temperature. And all of my siblings just acted like, oh no, we're doing what God wants. All of this is a test. We're doing, we're following Warren. And until my younger brother, one time I saw him on the side of the road. I pulled over and I said to him, what are you doing? And he said, nothing. We're not allowed to do anything. They've torn down the basketball courts. We can't play. We can't say the word fun. I said, why don't you get in my car? Let's have a chat. And so I told him that I was leaving. And at that point, I'd been packing up boxes. I'd been packing up, a towel here and a blanket there and a pan there and things that I wanted to take with me, things that were important to me. And I'd been filling up my closet, but I didn't want to be found out. And so I told him about it. He said, you can bring those to my house and I will store them for you until you're ready to go. And so I started doing this thing. He was married. He lived.
It's almost reminded me of like prison movies, where some prisoners are cobbling together, they're trying to negotiate a plan. They might be digging tunnels and they're taking the dirt and they're, dropping it out of their pockets while nobody's looking. The guards, they're giving the guards some extra perks so that they can learn the guards' plans and be friends with some of them or something. And it's very similar to that, the planning and all the work around that. Was anybody in St. George a friendly face at all?
No, not at this point, except for my daughter's doctor. She was really friendly, but that wasn't something that I was asking her for help with. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I filled up my brother's basement room with my boxes over the next couple of years. But one of the things, I knew I wanted to leave. I knew I needed to leave, but there was still this tension of I'm not going to have any place to belong. Now, the belonging is the number one human psychological need, right? And so you can have your food and water and your air, but you're not going to be healthy psychologically unless you have a tribe, a place to belong. And I knew I wasn't going to have that. And that I was going to give up everybody, all of my friends and all of my family and all of my community. And that was tough for me. I was a big part of the community. So this tension was happening of how quickly do I want to give this up and be utterly alone? Shunned severely. That was the word, shun them severely. Mm. So I knew my family had to shun me if they were following Warren Jeffs. And so there was the time I think it was in the year 2000, either in the year 2000 or 2001. And Rulon wasn't even dead at this point, but Warren stood up in church and said, Father says to take your children out of school because they're having to associate with apostates in school too much. And at this point, that made a chill run down my back because I'm like, this is how you make sure you don't have educated people who can't think for themselves, mm-hmm. and how you cement control. And I was really horrified. And so I used to sit in the choir. At this time, I was sitting in the audience for some reason. And I just kind of looked around and tried to look at people's faces, turn around, look behind me to see if anybody else's faces were going, yeah, what? And I didn't see anybody's faces doing mm-hmm. that. And my husband was sitting there, like, hold still. He was just like, he was terrified that we were going to get sent away. But I'm like, somebody else has to be having all of these alarm bells in their heads at this moment. And I didn't see anybody else's face have alarm bells. And I'm like, okay, well, this is it. Like, I have to get out of here. My kids are not going to have education. They're not going to be safe. He was taking kids from parents at this point, sending parents away, destroying families. He'd already destroyed all of the community structures as far as, oh no, that was after. But he started destroying the community structures, like physical structures, like our zoos and our parks and, places for kids to play. The basketball court got torn down because he said play is spelled WORK and kids aren't supposed to play. And I'm like, that's actually a developmental task. So, and then he stopped all of our social structures. We used to have plays and programs and dances and all of those things that made us very cohesive as a community. And he destroyed those as well. So I'm just getting more and more and more terrified that I'm going to have to do anything. In the meantime, my daughter is also very medically fragile. She's in and out of the hospital for the first 3 years of her life. And so I'm in between trying to, make sure that my daughter is going to stay alive, and how am I going to take care of my kids if I take them and leave, but I'm certainly not leaving them. And so it takes a long time to get the resources. And I finally saved up $5,000. I thought I was so rich.
It's a good chunk. It is a good chunk, honestly. Yeah. That was more than I was expecting, to be honest. Not to kind of minimize, it definitely won't go far for sure. But yeah. Oh, good for you. I just want to say, way to go. To at least have gotten that much. Yeah.
But I knew I'm like, I've got to get out. I've got to figure it out. And so I'd been calling places that were available for rent and just kind of asking, if I don't have any rental history, can I rent there? Yeah, you can, but your deposit's going to go up to $2,000 or whatever. And I finally found somebody who lived in California and agreed to rent to me. And I actually told him, I said, I will pay the first 6 months of rent in advance if that's what I have to do, because I don't have any rental history. He said, no, you're good. I'll rent to you. And so that was, I talked to him, I think in January of 2024. And then in February was that big infamous meeting where Warren Jeffs called everybody together and summoned up 21 or 22 men and excommunicated them in front of their families in the entire community. And
2004, I think you said 2024, but you mean 2004.
Sorry, 2004. Mm-hmm. And that was the day that I went home, and I'm like, okay, I'm going, this is it. Ready or not. I'm not going to have my kids raised in this community. I am not going to have them subject to this person. And so I gathered up everything, and my nephew and my brother went and picked up a U-Haul, brought it to my house. And luckily for me that day, my husband and my sister wife had gotten up and said, we're going to go to St. George. And I'm like,
great.
Of all of the fabulous plans.
Right.
But there still were other patrols and things like that, weren't there?
Well, so at this point, it wasn't anything like it became. And so, I thought that it was pretty bad. I thought that, if he'd gone off a cliff, I had no idea the depths he was going to go to. And so I'm just thinking, I am leaving this madman and the stuff he's doing to my community. I mean,
and you're like a pioneer. You don't know other people that have left very much, right?
No. Yeah. There were at that point, there were very few who had left. And that was really just the beginning. There was, of course, a floodgate opened 10 years after that. But yeah, and so we escaped really, really early. I had no idea how bad he was going to get. And I thought he was already really bad. But one of the things I kept thinking is, he's taking kids away from parents and giving them to other parents. And this is causing untold trauma. This is going to have huge, huge backlash. And nobody thought about that or was doing anything about that. And so anyway, I drove away that day, and I went around and I told my family goodbye. At that point, I'm like, I've got nothing left to lose. They can all know I've apostatized. And so I did. I went and found every one of them individually. And I said, I do not believe in what's happening. I think Warren's doing some really horrifying things. And so I'm going to be out of here. And I know that you have to shun me in order for you to be safe. And if you believe in him. So I am not going to try to contact you, but I want you to know that my door is always open to you. And so I left. And it was,
so it wasn't a fear then that someone would stop you at this point, other than your husband, who was out of the picture.
No, I wasn't afraid that anybody would stop me. Because honestly, this is a little bit of misinformation too, because Warren Jeffs did not want anybody there who was going to speak against him and poison the well. He wanted those elements gone. And so he tried to actually get in front of that. Anybody he felt was starting to pull away or become disloyal, he would just eject them from the community so they could not talk to the other people.
Yeah.
Now, there were cases where, specific women were chased down by their husband, but that wasn't a community-wide, you can't leave thing. That was,
okay.
He
But
wanted.
you just didn't know anybody, so the information was controlled enough that even it's kind of ironic that people he wanted out, like you, found it hard to get out. But I guess he probably, I don't know. I feel like what I see with men like this who want to control, they want to kick out anyway.
Yeah.
They would rather be able to kick you out in your most vulnerable, most desperate way, whatever way hurts you the most.
Yeah.
Whereas if you leave on your own terms, then you have a lot more benefit to that. So it makes sense now to me, actually, why it still kind of screws you over either way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was really, really tough leaving, knowing I was leaving all of my support structures and my daughter's nighttime nursing care and all of that. But it was on my own terms. And it was after I determined how I was going to be safe and how I was going to keep my kids safe. And so, yeah. And so for me, it was really important for me to control who knew and how and the timing and all of that.
And
so
what number wife were you?
I was the first wife.
You were the first wife.
Mm-hmm.
So you were legally married.
Mm-hmm.
So your husband would have some legal sort of not protections, but resources that he might be able to use to somehow
he could
find
have
you or other things.
He could have, but it went down like this. So we were not well matched in any way, certainly not intellectually. He got home from St. George and found the note that I'd left him, telling him why I was leaving and all of the things. And so he called Warren and told him that I'd left. And he called me after that and he said, "What do you think you're doing?" And I said, I left a pretty detailed note. You shouldn't have any questions. And he said, "Well, I called Uncle Warren and he said to ask you where you think you're going to get your blessings from." And I just said, "Well, you can tell him from me that I don't need the kind that he dispenses, but if God needs me, she knows where I am."
Nice.
So, and then I told him, I said, "Don't try to get custody of the kids because you married a 17-year-old and I will make sure that you have charges pressed against you."
Leverage.
And so he didn't try anything. I mean, he could have had leverage anyway, but he just knew it was a losing battle. And I have a reputation. So,
Wow. So how do you establish yourself in a new place now?
It was not
back
easy.
then.
It wasn't easy. For about 5 years, I really languished. I mean, so many times I say I should have done what I initially planned to do. And that was move to New York, far, far away, change my name, never look back, never let anybody know where I came from, and just start a new life. And every day I wonder why I didn't do that. But I moved to St. George because my daughter's doctor was there. And again, my daughter was medically fragile. So I wanted to make sure that she was, set up and taken care of before I did anything big. And
so you were only out of Utah for just a short while in California?
I never moved to California.
Oh, okay.
I've only ever lived 44 miles. Well, by the road, it's probably 15 miles as the crow flies from where I live right now. So, so I got settled here, and it took a long time because I didn't want to tell anybody who I was or where I was from because of the stigma. And so I wasn't really honest with people. I wasn't vulnerable with people, and it's difficult to establish connection and support that way. And so I was alone a lot. My husband got kicked out pretty soon after that. He came and moved in with us, and we tried to build a business and tried to have a family, and it just wasn't working. So we got divorced in 2007, which, fed into, I had a whole victim thing, the world was against me, and now he's doing all this stuff, and now we're getting divorced. And so it really took me kind of reaching rock bottom in about 2008 before I started getting into self-help and meditation and all of those things. And that's right about when people started coming and asking me for help for getting out. So I had people sleeping on my couch. I had people that I was connecting with, the local domestic violence shelter and local housing services and all of this stuff. So between 2008 and 2012, I was doing this grassroots social work that just I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew these resources existed. And so I was helping people. And then I started to realize that we needed an organization, we needed funding, we needed to do this on a much broader scale. And
you were a one-stop underground railroad.
pretty much.
Kind of.
So in 2012, I thought, well, I probably should get some education to learn how to do this. And I'd received my associate's degree from the community college in Colorado City before I ever got married. So I had my associates, but I started researching social work because that's what I was doing, and found out that the University of Utah was offering a distance ed program here in St. George. So I went online to investigate it, and within a couple of hours I was enrolled, and I'm like,
nice.
I don't know how that happened, but okay. So I started doing that. I still didn't know what I was going to do. I just started doing this program.
You're setting a foundation, I think. Yeah, building a foundation.
Yeah, and so while I was in my my bachelor program, then Alina Darger came and found me and said, "Hey, I heard you're trying to do this same kind of work that we're trying to do. We have filed the corporation papers for an organization, but we don't have any money, we don't have any structure. I just have this entity." And at the University of Utah, I served as an ambassador for President Pershing. And through him, I was able to meet a lot of people who were giving me lots of advice. And everybody across the board was saying, start an organization. I'm like, I don't have time. I don't want to do that paperwork. And so she came and said, I have the paperwork. And so we had to talk because, she's currently in a plural family. And so we had to have a conversation about what are your ethics around this? What is your driving force? What is your belief about how this work needs to happen? Because I'd met with other organizations that were rescuing polygamists, and they were doing it in a really harmful way, frankly. And so I'm like, I'm not going to do anything that imposes and forces choices on people. I can't have that. It is so counterproductive. And so she said, you and I agree on everything. Nobody should be forced in. Nobody should be forced out. Nobody should be forced to become a Christian. Nobody should be forced to anything. I said, okay, on that basis, we can start working together. So Cherish Families.
Education and informed consent.
Mm-hmm. And so in 2014, we started volunteering for Cherish Families because the 501c3 existed. And it wasn't until 2015 that we got our first grant. And by that point, my Bachelor of Social Work degree turned into a Master of Public Administration. So I had 5 days between my bachelor and master program.
Wow.
And
congrats. Good job.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. I chose public administration, even though I didn't even know it existed, because with my social work program, I told them I wanted to do community organization, macro practice, policy. And they said, yes, you can do that. But when it came right down to it, the only track they were offering to the distance ed program was counseling. I'm like, I'm not a therapeutic personality. I want to tell people what to do. Yeah. And they said, you're right. You should not become a therapist.
You want to be a facilitator.
Yeah. So they said, why don't you check out this other degree? And so the Master of Public Administration really fit in that in every way. And so it opened up a lot of ways to, create programs, do program evaluation, do macro practice, do community organization, influence policy, and all those things. So that's what I ended up doing. I ended up graduating with my master in 2017, but I'd been on Cherish Families payroll since 2015. And just building programs from there. So that's how the whole Cherish Families thing came about.
Awesome. And what is it? What's the best kind of? Well, I guess there's two ways we can go about this. If there's ways that you would like to interest our audience into helping and contributing to Cherish Families, we can go that direction, or we can go into I guess, an education direction. As you've pointed out a few times in this interview, some misconceptions that people have. If you would like to maybe address those and maybe educate our audience, we can go that direction too. I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I want to do all of that.
Yeah, okay.
I love the lecture.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I didn't even create a list, but I'll just come up with a few. There are a lot of misconceptions about polygamy and polygamists that tend to have a counterproductive effect when we're talking about actual human beings from these communities. And one of them is that all polygamists are the same. All polygamists are FLDS. That's like the catch-all phrase for polygamists. And that's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, FLDS is the incorporated name of the Warren Jeffs group.
Right.
And that
there's many more.
one small part of all of, fundamentalist Mormonism, the plural community. And so, and there are so many different expressions. Earlier I mentioned Alina, her family is part of the category called independent, where they don't actually have a leader. And the way they operate their family is so drastically different than any of the groups. And they're a lot more egalitarian even than most monogamous families. And so, there's just a million different ways that people practice Mormon fundamentalism. And so for the narrative to be that it is horrifying and abusive and all of those things, I'm like, I mean, it can be, and so can monogamy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Plural communities, particularly the organized religious groups of, polygamous groups, can be abusive, and so can all of the other organized religious groups, right? The mainstream Mormon church can be abusive. Catholicism can, Judaism can, Islam can. Like, there's not a monopoly on abuse or control or, unrighteous dominion in any group. And so for me, the thing I always ask people to remember is that there is a cross sector of humanity, no matter where you slice any group. And in any group, you're going to find really amazing people, some just really normal people, and some really, really crappy people. But when we're talking about underserved communities like, fundamentalist Mormons, they always get defined by their worst members.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's something that's going on, a polygamist did something, then all of the comments for everything is they all do that. And then nobody speaks up and disabuses that. And so I think that this is where we do ourselves some real harm. And I'm talking about we in mainstream do ourselves harm because we make sure that people who are vulnerable in those communities don't dare come ask for help because they know they've been lumped in with all of the bad guys.
Yeah.
So, so for me, it's like,
avoid making comments like that, and feel free to correct comments like that as we see others do them. Okay.
So
I think that's a great starting point. Yeah.
And, for my money, and here I'm just going to reveal myself. I feel like there's a toxic masculinity and a harmful patriarchy across every structure of our society, in our political structures, in our social structures, in our religious structures. It doesn't matter where you find it. But mainstream is really, I'm going to say, hypocritical in that that's what they want to call out in fundamentalist communities. You guys treat women badly. And I'm always right here being really happy to hold up a mirror. It's like, who's you guys? You just barely said whatever, And so for me, I'm like, nobody has a monopoly on evil.
That's right. And toxic patriarchy hurts men just as much as women a lot of times.
Absolutely. I mean, all the time. It's harmful to human beings.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm like, it's okay to call out the harms in plural communities if you're calling them out individually and not calling out the entire community. When was the last time we said all of the men in St. George are rapists because there was a rapist on the news in St. George?
Right.
We don't do that.
Yeah.
And it's not okay to do that to underserved communities. And that's the same reason. And here's my next diatribe that I tell people, don't use the word cult. Because the word has zero utility as far as describing behaviors. Every or unpopular religious group is called a cult, even though its truth claims and its practices aren't necessarily worse or more extreme than mainstream accepted religions.
Mhm.
And so all it is a way to demonize and denigrate a group without actually having facts and reasons why we, what we're calling out specifically. And so I won't use the word cult when I'm
So
talking
you
about
say
the
like
FLDS.
high demand structures, or what do you categorize them, or you just say you're only looking for the toxicity and not?
I'm calling
there's
out
no
the
names.
specific behaviors because frankly, I have not found a not high demand religion. You can help me find one if you know of one, but I don't know of any.
Mhm.
And so for me,
That's a good
it's
point.
syntax, right? It's a euphemism. We're not calling it a cult. Instead, we're going to call it a high demand religion. What exactly are we talking about? Let's talk about that. And then let's call that out in all of the other acceptable religions as well. Let's call it
Yeah.
out across the board and stop being a hypocrite.
So
Right.
part of what Cherish Families does is there's no cookie cutter approach to anything. It's like individualized.
Yeah, so we offer crime victim services, mental health, housing, food
And I
and
can
basic
bring up the
needs.
website.
Mhm. We offer family peer support and basically anything anybody needs. We offer what's the word, education or access to educational services. Right now we have Southwest Adult Public High School at our building in Colorado City. It's helping adults get high school diplomas if they need remedial education. And then we help people get into other education if they want to further their education. So there's just a ton of services we offer. And if we don't offer it, like, we don't want to duplicate Department of Workforce Services, for example. So we will go in and train Department of Workforce Services on how to interact with people from this community to not drive them away. And then we have a dedicated way we're able to refer it directly into their system. And then there's a cross referral. So they'll send people back to us for anything that somebody needs to get and maintain employment that they don't provide. So we do this whole wraparound collaborative approach. It's been pretty magical.
And so this is cherishfamilies.org.
Yeah. And next to what Jean's got highlighted now, there's a Get Involved tab. If this is something that you want to either donate to or volunteer for, especially if you're in that area in Southern Utah, I think that's great too. That can be a way to get more hands-on, maybe if you're looking to do that.
Yes, and we aren't just in Southern Utah. So we are, that building you can see right there. This is kind of a cool story. I'll come back to what I was going to say, but this building is the building that Warren Jeffs used to publish his Revelations from. And so we've repurposed it into a healing center in the community, which is really cool. We are also located in Northern Utah. We actually have 4 locations. 2 of those are offices and 2 are service centers. And we've got, I think, 20 employees across the state, some in Colorado City, so Arizona. And we've served folks in Canada, Mexico, and 19 states. It's either 17 or 19.
Awesome.
So, yeah,
so there's a lot more reach than I realized. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for correcting that.
Yeah. And so if people would like to donate or volunteer, we have suffered along with everybody else with the funding cuts that are going on right now.
Yeah.
And from both the state and the federal government. And so we're doing a big fundraiser to try to supplement our mental health funds because it's kind of grim right now.
Okay. Good to know. Thanks for sharing that, Jean. Anything else you want to, that you want to hit?
Me?
Yeah. Mention the problems that are happening right now in, we'll say, the America's help industries.
Yeah, I mean, nobody knows, what's going to be the outcome. I wish it weren't true that we are at the end of a grant cycle and that we're writing to renew our federal grants, but we are. If we were in the middle of a grant cycle, I would feel a little bit safer. But as we have to write a new grant, and then we'll find out if we get the crime victim funding, which is through the Department of Justice. And so we'll find out within the next couple of months. But even if we do get that, we'll be cut. VOCA, that's the Victims of Crime Act. That funding has been cut across the nation over the past 4 or 5 years to about, we're almost about a third of what we had 5 years ago to provide services. So
Wow.
we're really scrambling to keep providing the services and the level of resources that we do provide.
I'm sorry to hear that. I hope that I hope you can get that funding back or get it from another source if possible. So, yeah.
I do too. Yeah. Tell your friends.
We'll definitely put this up. We'll have all of the links, I think, in the description as well, so people can follow through with that. It did look like there were some online trainings on the calendar. It was briefly showed. So that's extremely accessible just to even learn more about this from anywhere, right?
Yeah, we do. We offer cultural sensitivity training for all of our collaborative partners.
Okay.
I've trained court systems, police, hospital systems, government agencies, other nonprofits. And then we offer classes as well that we're able to have people come in and, take classes in parenting, in healthy relationships, personal safety. We're actually partnered with the Smart Foundation, Elizabeth Smart Foundation, to do the personal safety class right now. And so we're doing a lot of really cool things. And I'm really proud of what Cherish Families does, because everything we do is evidence-based. We're not just, making up, wow, we're going to try this, and then we think we're going to have really great outcomes. It's like we're evidence-based. We keep all of our data. We do program evaluation. We know what we're doing, and we know that what we do works. It's trauma-informed. It's culturally sensitive, it's confidential, and it's strengths-based. And so for me, those were the requirements that I had. When I first spoke with Alina, I said, we're not going to do anything that isn't all of these things. We're not going to exploit people that we help. We're not going to put them on television and cut their hair in front of the world to prove that they're now worthy, and we're not going to tell people stories.
You're not going to have a documentary where you go in and rescue them and you're like dressed like Rambo with guns blazing or anything like that.
No trauma porn.
That would be kidnapping, I think, and that's basically essentially what that was.
Well, and it's just so, it's so immoral, when you're dealing with people who are so already having ambiguous loss about losing their families, and then you exploit their story for your own glory. I find that really, really horrific. And so
somebody named Tim Ballard might do something like that, maybe.
So confidential, right? Yeah. And so trauma informed, so evidence based, so strengths based. Because one of the things that people have said to us so many times, it's, I still, Cherish Families has been in business for 11 years, and I still have people ask me, if Cherish Families helps me, do I have to be on TV? Because that has been such a recurring theme. Yeah. And so I just, no, we're not.
You're a safe place. You are a safe place. The safest, it sounds like, for victims.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah. And then having things be evidence-based, and we're not just, here, study the Bible and then you'll be all better. It's really, really important to me that we're doing programs that are, SAMHSA, substance abuse and mental health.
Mental health, right. Important.
So the programs that are coming
are certified.
They're certified, and we have certified peer support specialists who go to state training, and we're taking our data and we're giving reports and saying, here are our outcomes. And so it's really, really important to me, but the strengths-based part of it too, because I think there's this, it's just part of the zeitgeist around what polygamists are. And that is they're broken and they don't know anything and they have to be made over in my image in order to be worthy. And so for us, it's like, there's nothing broken about you.
What are some of the things volunteers can do?
Resources. So right now we are trying to create a therapy garden next to our building in Colorado City. We could use, all of the resources to do that. We're at the place where we're ready to put in the concrete pads and the walking paths. And so, we need the concrete donated. We could use the help, people putting in the plants and trees and things like that.
So people are tired of cleaning up the temples and the ward buildings. They come down to Colorado City and do some good work.
Yeah.
You can come and paint the outside of our building. We're going to paint a mural on it too. It's going to be really cool. We get donations from the Walmart distribution center that's located really close by.
Mhm.
And whenever they get overruns, and so we have to have volunteers come and take the tags off and help us sort, and all of those things. So we do have volunteer opportunities, but
Okay.
So
do you have like job resources that you can help people get jobs and things like that as well?
Yeah, that's what I was saying with Department of Workforce Services. We have a really great close collaboration, and so we will help people get up the courage and all of the things to make that leap, and then we'll refer them, and then we'll actually do joint case management so that they understand what Department of Workforce Services needs. Department of Workforce Services can tell us what other things people might need for employment, and then we also have a close collaboration with Voc Rehab. Same kind of thing. So we're constantly referring back and forth to those.
Do you know what percent of your budget is grants and what percent is individual donors?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the wrong percentage. Probably 90-10 right now.
90% government.
Grants.
So the individual donors need a little bit of spurring, a little bit of encouragement.
Yeah, and actually up. That brings up another volunteer. I'm supposed to be the fundraiser and development coordinator on top of my other 3 full-time jobs. And so it's not happening. And so if you know of anybody, or if anybody listening to this knows how to do that, I could use a volunteer in that area. That would be really grand.
And they could work at any of the locations, or 2 of the locations, either in Alpine or down in St. George area, or
probably. Well, and my office is in St. George, and so I mean, we could work remotely. They wouldn't have to actually be in my office to do that. So
yeah,
but yeah, I don't know how to do fundraising, and it's always on the back burner because I've always got 3 fires.
Can people contact you directly on the website, or do you also want to give your own direct email for people to contact you about that, or is it easier to just funnel to the website and find you there?
Yeah, it would probably be easier to go to the website and it says there's a contact us, and you can just put in your information. Partly what gets accomplished from that is that it goes to 2 other people's inbox, and that they can direct it wherever it needs to go. And my inbox has like 1,000 unread emails, and I might not get to you as quickly as if you go to the website.
Okay. So we'll do that. We'll leave off here. Thank you so much for coming on, Shirlee. We encourage everyone to check out the website just to even see what you can learn more about with this. And then, if you could and are able to donate, I'm sure they would appreciate that. And if you have knowledge on fundraising efforts, please reach out. And hopefully we can have you back, Shirlee, from time to time, just to kind of keep this up in our minds, keep this up in the forefront, and share progress. So, yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your having me on.
Thank you. Any last words, Gene, before we close out the show?
Thanks again for coming on. We're happy to let people know where they can get involved and help out where help is needed. And if any of our audience knows someone that could really use this information, either to use Cherish Families, or that they're looking for ways that they can volunteer, put in some good time and work. And also if that, anybody who is moneyed, who might be able to help with this valuable organization, please share this with them and let them know about the website and other things. Thanks for watching. Thanks again, Shirlee, and everybody. That's right. And like and subscribe, and have a great rest of 2025. Bye-bye.